Welcome. This is my favorite book I read from each month of the year. Let's go. So in January, I was in a book club with some of the girls from my town, and we read The Things We Leave Unfinished by Rebecca Yarros. I am not usually a romance girly. I like romantasy and I like some romance, but a lot of times I find it to be so very cheesy and there's not a whole lot else going on. And so I get a little icked out by it. But The Things We Leave Unfinished by Rebecca Yarros it's like the perfect blend of romance and historical fiction. And the twist at the end is so out of this world. I sobbed, literally sobbed. I could not get past it for days. It is one of the best books that I have ever read. It jumps back and forth in the timeline. So you start off with a girl who has lost her grandmother, and her grandmother was an author, so she's trying to find someone to finish her grandmother's last book, which happens to be her story. You also get the grandmother's story, which is the story that is in the book that she's trying to get finished. The characters in it are so lovable. You cannot help but fall in love with them. And like I said, the twist. In February, the best book I read was Throne of the Fallen by Kerri Maniscalco. I actually read the Kingdom of the Wicked series also in February, which I thought was excellent. A lot of people did not like that series. That's what comes before Throne of the Fallen. I loved it. But Throne of the Fallen is definitely the star of that world. The Prince Envy she really does know how to write a romantasy man. It's just so good. I love the magic. I love the world building. It's very different from all of the other romantasy that's out there right now. The world is very different. There are a lot of different types of characters. You have shapeshifters, demons, witches, fae, all of the above. It is very spicy. In March, I finished the Magnolia Park series. So I actually started it in the end of January, beginning of February, and was not sure that I was really into it. I had just read that first book. And then I decided to pick it back up in March. And Daisy Haites became one of my favorite books that I read all year long. Honestly, that series in general is my favorite series I have read. I am so obsessed with that story. It follows some rich kids that live in England and kind of their drama, their relationships, their issues. The Magnolia books follow Magnolia Parks, who is got an on again, off again thing with her ex-boyfriend BJ, and he has cheated on her, and so it's kind of their story. The Daisy Haites books follows Daisy, who is the daughter of a crime lord, and her brother has basically raised her, and he's also a crime lord. And so it follows her with all of the boys that are a part of that crime organization. And the star of that series is Julian, her brother. So her stories are the best ones. The very first Daisy book, called Daisy Haites, is my favorite book of that series. In April, I picked up The Rule of the Aurora King, which is the second book in the Trial of the Sun Queen series by Nisha J. Tuli. I am obsessed with that series. That second book was where it all turned around for me. I did not love the first book, but I gave it a second try, kind of like Magnolia Parks, and I just fell in love with it. It is a romantasy. It follows the same tropes as the rest of them do, but I just feel like the banter and the tension in her books is so well done. She doesn't rush anything. She lets it kind of take its time, and I love that. And our main female character in those books is the star. She is tough, and I just absolutely love it. In May, I read The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah. And I was really iffy about if I wanted to read it or not, because I am not typically a historical fiction lover. I find some of it to be kind of boring, and I just wasn't sure that it was going to be my thing, and it's very long. With that being said, I sat down to read it, and within about 36 hours, I finished the book. I could not put it down. It is beautiful. It makes you think. I just could not help but fall in love with the characters, and I was heartbroken several times while reading it. It's like a roller coaster that you just cannot get off. And I don't want to give anything away, but it really is a beautiful story. And if you haven't read it, you should definitely check it out. In June, I was in quite a reading slump because I did finish Throne of Glass that month and was very much just burnt out on romantasy because I had read that large series and I liked it, but it left me in quite a reading slump. So I picked up the Ravenhood series by Kate Stewart to try to pull me out of that. I thought it was going to be like a light little romance. I was mistaken, first of all, so mistaken. But Exodus, the second book in that series, was my favorite book that I read for the entire month of June. I was so obsessed with that series, and that book in particular is kind of where it all comes to a head. She really did such a great job with that series of just like sucking you in. I read all 3 books in a week. I could not put it down. I laughed, I cried, I got everything you want out of a romance while also having my heart broken, while also being on the edge of my seat and being in this suspense. It is perfection. In July, I read the 3rd book in the Trial of the Sun Queen series. It's called Fate of the Aurora King. Whoa. That is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, romantasy books I've ever read. I was squealing. I couldn't breathe through part of it. The tension in that book is so good. You just are on the edge of your seat. She did the slow burn in the best way. It is just, you just want to eat it up. Eat it with a spoon. I was on such a high from that book after I finished it. In August, I read The Butterfly Garden. Oh my gosh, that is one of the best books I've ever read. I flew through it. First of all, I could not get enough. I did listen to the audio and read at the same time. It's kind of like Law and Order SVU kind of style. You're getting the story from her as she's in the police station, so you know that it's all played out. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. I could not get to the end fast enough because I just needed to know what happened. So then in August and September, I was working my way through the From Blood and Ash series, and I read the first book from the prequel series. It's called A Shadow in the Ember, and it was my favorite book in the month of September. I could not get enough of it. I love Sarah and Nyktos' story. It is just the best romantasy. I am so invested in their story, and I just ate it up. I will say that series you have to flip back and forth between the prequel and From Blood and Ash, and I did not like very much when I got to the end of that book and had to switch back to From Blood and Ash, but overall, it was my favorite book in September. In October, I finally got the courage to read One Last Rainy Day by Kate Stewart, which is kind of a spinoff of the Ravenhood series. It's the story of what happens in that from another person's perspective, and I really wasn't sure that I even wanted to read it because I had no motivation to read that person's perspective. With that being said, I absolutely loved that book. I kind of felt like I already read this story once. I don't really need to rehash it, but I did need to. It gives you kind of what's going on with the boys while all of Flock and Exodus are happening, because you really don't know, because Cecilia's not a part of it. And I really enjoyed that. It was kind of like Sons of Anarchy. And then all of his internal kind of monologue, his thoughts, just and I sobbed when I got to the end of that, and I really didn't think that was going to happen because I knew what was going to happen, but it just it was the best ending for all of that. You get so much closure from it, but man, she'll just pull right on your heartstrings. And then in November, I read Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, and I really was kind of surprised by that. I don't mind science fiction, but I've never really loved it the way that I loved that. I think part of it is it's got such a steady pace. You're just so in the story and there's just very, very little downtime. Just things are happening so quickly. Also very easy to understand sometimes I think the science part of science fiction can be a little overwhelming. This is not like that. And you're just so invested. I read it in 24 hours. I could not stop. Everyone can kind of connect to that story because everyone's had the feelings that he's having. It starts off kind of like what if I would have done things differently, and it is so good. Obviously December is not over, so I don't know what my favorite book of December will be, but I will let you know. I would love for you to tell me in the comments what your favorite books of the year were, and thank you so much for watching.